You're watching Deprogrammed. My name's Harrison Pitt. I'm a writer for the European Conservative, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Evan Riggs, who's a freelance journalist, and by Anna McGovern, who is a political commentator. Now, Evan and I were shocked recently to discover, Anna, that I think a quarter now of young people, Generation Z, which I think includes all three of us, now identifies as being somewhere on the LGBT spectrum. What do you think is driving young people to embrace these unstable identities?
I definitely think social media plays a huge role, especially with children as young as 13 now having being able to have a lot of unfiltered access. So you've got apps such as TikTok, for example, where, you know, again, children as young as 13 can use it, but we know that even younger children are using it. But with elements of the app, such as search section, for example, you can look up terms such as mental health, body image, or body dysmorphia, anorexia, or even suicide, LGBT, anything around that could cause a vulnerability there. You can look this up, and then on your explore page, this content will be spammed on your phone within a couple of minutes. So let's say a child as young as 13 is looking up things like this, and then you have that repetition on your explore page where you're constantly exposed to this. It would affect you because you're consuming content as a young person that you're way too young to understand. And I think because a lot more young people are now consuming this content, they're sort of like supporting each other in, you know, even having these, you know, unstable identities. And it's almost like, you know, you have these coming out posts you now see. You've even seen young people actually filming themselves taking testosterone, for example, when they're actually transitioning, and children watching that. So it's like this kind of online affirmation that you get for, you know, establishing this unstable identity and broadcasting it to the world.
So there's a false sense of membership of a community. Evan, you must have views on this.
I don't even think it's a false sense of membership. I think it's a genuine membership. I mean, there is no kind of parallel to just being a normal person anymore. I mean, you know, luckily I missed a lot of this stuff when I was in middle school and high school. You know, if we wanted to find some smut, we had to like sneak Stephen King books out of the library. But, you know, these kids, back in the day, you had goths or you had scene kids, and this seems to be the next kind of evolution about it. But now it's not only kind of stage sanctioned, it's also been highly medicalized, where these people, you know, many of these, in the same study that they found that 1 in 4 people are now identifying as LGBT. The vast majority of it was bisexual or trans. It wasn't actually lesbian or gay. And the amount of people who are still having, you know, sort of a gay encounter or in a gay relationship has remained perfectly stable. So that aspect of it isn't changing at all. What you have is instead a bunch of people who are kind of deracinated from their identities and seeking something to give them status, which everybody does in high school because your identity is highly fluid. You're trying to figure out who you are and you want to kind of status signal to everybody around you. And the easiest way to do it is like, I'm trans because I grew my hair out a little bit longer and wore a purple shirt. I think the social media aspect is important, but I also think about the high school that I went to and how the kind of environment has changed. I mean, a lot of this stuff, I didn't know what a transgender person was until I was 20. I mean, you know, maybe if I'd found it at 13. I
still don't know what a transgender person is.
Or what a woman is. Yeah, I'm confused about it all. But I always think back to, I went to high school in Virginia, right where the colonists landed. And at my high school, we had like a giant rock right in front of our school. And when I was there, it was painted with like an American flag. And this was back in like, Obama had just gotten in, you know, it was like freedom fries and everybody was still very patriotic.
It was halcyon days of 2008.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I went back there a few years ago and the giant rock had been painted with an LGBT flag with a Black Lives Matter fist going right up the middle. And I was like, I think this is like a perfect sign of just how much the kind of educational environment has changed since we were in it.
And I worked at a school as well, in an independent like boarding school. And what I saw especially was this being perpetuated, especially like for young people. And I think it was more significant for the international students who were coming to the school for the first time. But I actually have a story where a couple of students that I knew, they'd come to the UK for the first time, went to the school and said, like they're biological women or just women, and I shouldn't say biological because you're perpetuating the culture.
It's why is the existence of another type.
Exactly, there isn't. It's a woman. So 2 young women came to the school for the first time, and they told the teachers in confidence, "I actually identify as a boy." and they didn't want the parents to know, so they covered it up. And they said, this is my new name, this is what I want to be identified as, I want to be a he, him. And the school hid this from the parents. And I think what makes it worse is the fact that they were international students. So the parents are, so they're living on site, and the teachers are, basically parenting these kids, and the parents have no idea, and they can't support them in any way, or, they have no idea, and that this is going on. And I think for me, it's just, something really unsettling about that. And we were all told we have to keep this secret, and like even in correspondence to the parents, we would have to use their former name that they would say. So the parents were completely unaware. And I think it's just definitely something that's perpetuated across schools. And it's like, if you challenge it or say, is this the right thing to do? You'll basically be called a transphobe or homophobic, and you'll be met with a lot of hate because of that.
Yes. Often dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill by its critics. Ron DeSantis' actual bill in Florida was really cool, and it's only 8 pages long. The good thing about conservatives is that we write very short bills because we get to the point. But it's actually called, as you two probably know, the Parental Rights and Education Bill, and one of its better provisions is exactly to make sure that the kind of thing that happened at that independent school at which you worked doesn't happen anymore. Teachers can't go over the heads of parents. So if a child is identifying as transgender in school, it's now illegal in the state of Florida in a public school to hide that from parents. Parents need to be fully involved in the consultative process there.
Yeah, again, talking about how the kind of scholastic environment has changed. I mean, the response to that from teachers all around the US was insane. I mean, literally the bill is just saying basically you can't indoctrinate children into this like kind of LGBT cult until they hit the 5th grade.
Or hide it from their parents, because that's a neglected part of the bill.
But that's the thing. It's like these teachers are saying, well, look, I've got a master's degree in education. What kind of qualifications does a parent have? And it's like, this sounds like something straight out like the Khmer Rouge. Like, what are you guys talking about? You have a master's degree.
You have no say, you have no sort of sovereignty over your own children. We do, as your enlightened betters. That kind of mentality is extremely authoritarian. But I think, and this speaks quite well to what you were describing, Evan, about how that rock is now covered with a sort of LGBT rainbow with a sort of Black Lives Matter fist going through it. We now live in a culture that prizes maximal autonomy and the pursuit of sort of false forms of authenticity over responsibility, duty, and belonging. And so that's what a flag represents, isn't it? It's a symbol of unity, and it's supposed to engender in people a sense of loyalty towards what makes us a cohesive whole, a first-person plural, as Roger Scruton used to put it. But liberals are loftily indifferent to those forms of identity, and to that, and to that. Liberals are loftily indifferent to the idea that people have inherent duties that come with citizenship, because the whole liberal idea is that you're first and foremost an individual, and therefore the real thing that you should be pursuing isn't loyalty, belonging, it's sort of authenticity and freedom. And the radical left is sort of actively enthusiastic about conscripting more and more recruits to this sort of very narcissistic form of ideology. And so those two threats combined, liberal indifference and sort of left-wing enthusiasm, are creating real problems for our culture. I mean, what you were saying, Evan, about how you think that a lot of this identifying as bisexual is actually skin deep. It's just a way of sort of signaling status. I hope that's true, because our fertility rate is low enough in this country as it is, and in the decades ahead, we could be where Japan is. We could be on the verge of sort of civilizational population collapse. We need young people to be getting together, having children, so that we can get that fertility rate up. And I don't think it's an accident that the only Western country in the world which has sort of a fertility rate above replacement levels is Israel, which has an extreme sense of national loyalty, an extreme sense of religious purpose, and which is also conscious of itself as very much living in history and needing to rise to that challenge.
Whereas on all sides.
Yes, whereas we're sleepwalking as a culture, and I think that's what this reflects in large part.
I think you just have to give people something better to believe in, and if they don't want to go to church, I mean, you could always do national service like the Israelis do.
Yes. And
that kind of engenders a sense of loyalty. But I think, you were talking about people, kind of the adherents of liberalism want to be kind of atomized individuals, but this isn't actually true in a large way, because I don't think before, when liberalism was kind of in its heyday, people had a sense of meaning that was brought about by the church, or that was brought about by a vague sense of nationalism. And now that both those things have kind of waned away, they are finding something to kind of subsume themselves underneath, and it's now the kind of tenets of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, you know, people identifying as bisexual that's been done in universities for a very long time. You know, girls or the occasional guy will come out as bisexual.
This is where the term lug comes from. It's a very, I don't know if you've heard the term lug. LUG, lesbian until graduation, basically.
So every last Sunday of the month, Kelly J. Keane, women's rights activist, she hosts a speaker's corner for women to have a voice and basically talk about their experiences. So for example, like where women's only spaces are now being stripped away, you know, you're having shared toilets, for example, with men, which is putting a lot of women in danger, and it gives them a platform to share their story where their voices are being drowned out by this mob. And on Sunday at Hyde Park, there was a huge protest with it was pretty much all young trans activists who turned up with like wearing face masks, wearing ridiculous costumes, looking very, very crazy, protesting this, shouting. They were even fighting each other, fighting the police. Like, when I was walking past, you would not have been able to tell what side I was on. And people started like coming up to me, trying to attack me just because I was walking past, or like throwing umbrellas in my face because they're trying to conceal themselves. And you can almost see the difference where with Kelly's event, it was very peaceful, everyone's just sharing the story, being incredibly supportive, and then you had this mob right next to the event going on. You've got the police just standing in front of them to keep us safe, and all of them just screaming and shouting and starting fights. They don't have any respect, and they don't care about women's rights or anything other than themselves and this ideology that they've just been so captured by.
Yes, and they're animated by a sense of religious zeal, which makes them feel as though they're on the right side of history, and that therefore any kind of action is justified because we're trying to usher in a better tomorrow. That would be how they justify it to themselves, at least. As I understand it, you weren't always as politically sound as you are now. From my vantage point anyway, you're more sound now. Can you tell us a little bit about your background politically and culturally speaking, and sort of what brought you over to the dark side?
So when I was 14, I started getting involved in a lot of social action and volunteering with different charities, because for me at the time it was just I really wanted to help other people, make a difference in society. I was very active with the NSBCC and Childline back then. But as I got older and stayed involved with various parts of their campaigns and with different organisations, all of them are political, normally trying to get the government to do something. And I think that first captured my interest in politics. And when I moved to Medway for doing my A-levels at the time, I joined the UK Youth Parliament, which has now been very captured to the left, I think. And when you're part of that, you get to see a lot of the local politics in your area as well that happens. You get involved, with all the local events. And I think for me, seeing, Conservative and Labour, fighting each other, that really captured my interest. As like, how could I, get more politically active? However, there wasn't many, or if any, I don't think, young people I knew who were Conservative. All of them were very left-wing. And I think for young people, if you actually had any right-wing values, you would immediately get a lot of hate for that.
Yes.
Because I think they just associate the right with just evil, and you just hate everyone, rather than actually this is something that you believe in. So for me, as I got more politically active, and with lockdown that happened, I started, everything shut down. I had a lot more time to actually learn more about politics and actually meet other people via, Twitter's a really good platform for like meeting other like-minded people, but I started getting more politically active. Because before, I think a lot of my circles were very left-wing people, and I always knew inherently that I've got more conservative values.
That's interesting. So even, if I may interrupt you very quickly.
That's all right.
Even when you were sort of in the throes of ideological possession, no, I'm joking. But even when you were sort of more leftwards in your orientation, those beliefs, your attachment to those beliefs was slightly skin deep.
Yes, because I think in deep down, I was sort of questioning why, like, a lot of the stuff that was happening at the time, especially with the ideology that was starting to grow. I'm talking like LGBT, for example,
sure.
And kind of trans rights trumping women's rights. Like myself. I started to question it and think, is this actually okay? And even just things that were happening in our, national politics at the time, people would just sort of blindly support Labour without actually understanding anything that they stand for, because especially like the Jeremy Corbyn era and everything. And I think within me, I always felt like a sort of questioning, like, what, do I need to believe this? But then I remember when I started to become more conservative, and I was actually terrified to tell anyone, because I was like, I'm going to lose all my friends, no one's going to like me, I'm going to get a lot of abuse for it, which is actually really bad, because it's like, you shouldn't, it's the fact that I might have different opinions that my peers would, like, just because I'm a bit more conservative, that would mean I'd possibly get a lot more abuse for that, people turning against me. But then I think for me, during lockdown, meeting more like-minded people gave me the confidence to then learn about it more and actually just come out and say, I have conservative values, this is what I believe, rather than just, I think for a lot of young people, saying what you think everyone wants you to hear. Especially like Black Lives Matter. Like, I don't know if everyone remembers the black box posting on Instagram.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
If you didn't post that black box, you're racist.
Yes.
Even though Black Lives Matters is a racist organisation.
I got chewed out for that, actually.
Really?
By a friend of mine when I was working in bars in Canada. They were like, I haven't seen you post the black box on Instagram. I was like, I don't have
How dare you?
I don't have an Instagram. What's the black box? But apparently this person was kind of tallying off everybody who had worked with us, who had posted this black box, and they were like, what do you mean? How can you not have an Instagram? How can you not be supporting this? Someone was like, well, first of all, Black Lives Matter, or build large mansions, or whatever people are calling it now, is like a hate group. But secondly, like, I don't need to become political at all times. This is way before, COVID and everybody became hyper politicized on Twitter. But I think even it's sad going back to the high schoolers, where you have to understand that this is also happening to like 10th graders, people who are like 15, where their friends are keeping track of who's supported it and who's come out and who's publicly, it's even...
They're too young to understand it.
It's also, I remember when I was in high school, there was nothing political about it. Nobody was political. Nobody had Republicans or Democrats, left or right. Like, nobody had any sort of opinions at all. I feel bad for these kids these days, where they feel forced to post certain things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Otherwise somebody will castigate them.
Well, I remember when I was young, and I think I started to question some of these things. So, for example, I've got a particular story where I was with a group of friends, and they were talking about polyamory being a good thing, which I absolutely disagree with. But they were saying, polyamory is a good thing. Yes. And I sort of questioned it. I was like, is it a good thing, though, to be doing when, shouldn't we be encouraging people to be monogamous? And even just by saying that, before I could even finish my point, they all turned on me, and I was getting so much abuse, like, how dare you, you're hateful. One of them apparently said they are polyamory, so that was offensive to them. So it's like, even if you try and challenge the ideology and the narrative, you'll just be met with so much abuse. And I think for these young people who are just being captured, even at schools, even by teachers who are indoctrinating these kids, if they even try and challenge it amongst their peer groups or with their teachers or anything, they will be abused. They'll get a lot of abuse for it. They'll lose their friends. And I think for a lot of young people, that will actually make them nervous to question it, because in case they lose their friends, and then they don't, they just sort of follow along with it. And again, like on Sunday, I was talking about the trans activists that turned up. A lot of them were very young, like some of them maybe 14, 15 as well.
On the other side?
On the other side, the trans activists who were like 14, turning up. Some of them must have been as young as that.
Narcissistic parents, you would assume. Bringing them along to that sort of thing. And
it's like they cannot understand what they're shouting, because they're like that. You actually talk. I saw some social media videos online where, so for example, my friend Jess, who was on this program recently, asked one of them, "Why are you here?" And they couldn't actually answer the question. She said, "I don't actually know what actually know what the whole protest is about." She couldn't actually answer the question, and it's actually quite. You sort of feel sorry for them, because it's like they've just sort of been captured by this mob, and they're turning up to sort of stand for something they don't understand.
Yes. Well, this is I think it's common for any kind of political movement, particularly if it takes on sort of messianic trappings, it sort of considers itself, you know, it considers we will inherit the earth, sort of thing. They're always going to be extremely intolerant towards people who dissent from them. But in terms of actually badgering people who aren't interested in the fight, in like with the sort of the black squares thing on BLM, like, you know, tallying who has and who hasn't, you know, openly declared themselves loyal to the cause. I think part of this has to do with the outlook which these activists themselves adopt to our society. So because their whole pitch to us is that, you know, these cultural pathologies, whether it's sort of racism or homophobia or transphobia or every other species of bigotry, these pathologies are so woven into our cultural DNA. They've infected everything from our education to the sciences to our literary culture. They're so all pervasive that the only justifiable position to adopt is active opposition to all of our institutions. And so to the extent that you're indifferent, you can't sort of sit on this, according to them. People like Evan, who just working in the bar and doesn't have an Instagram account, doesn't want to virtue signal this way.
No idea what I'm talking about.
He's not allowed to be indifferent. He's not allowed to just sit on the sidelines and say, look, I'm sitting this one out, I'm not interested. Obviously you're not sitting it out now, but 5 years ago or so ago.
That was the beginning of the end for me.
That was the beginning of the end for you. You need, no, this is what Ibram X. Kendi in his book, what's it called? How to be an anti-racist.
Anti-racist baby?
No, that's his pitch.
While you're young.
That's his pitch to children.
Oh,
but how to be an anti-racist. He has all these sorts of lines saying, I can't remember them all by heart. But he basically exhibiting this mentality, like you're either with us or against us. Sort of
Absolutely,
mentality.
yeah, it's friend enemy. And I mean, Jean Piaget, the developmental psychologist, you know, he had a kind of stage for people when they're kind of entering late teens to early adulthood called the messianic stage, which is people they don't actually want to sit on the sidelines. Like a lot of young people, they want to have a cause like you did. Like they want to be volunteering, they want to be out. And this is the only socially acceptable one. And I think a lot of this LGBT stuff, it's, you can kind of pretend that you're being transgressive while knowing that you have basically the full backing of the state and nobody can say anything against you. I mean, we are in the kind of minority here as, you know, right-wingers or conservatives, which is kind of fun because it's now becoming somewhat punk rock, like Nick Cave recently said.
Transgressive.
But also, too, it's like you actually will suffer some serious consequences if you say the wrong thing in the wrong place. Yeah. And I think a really interesting thing, some more data that's come out of the American high schools, is that 65% of 12th grade boys in America now identify as conservative. And I think it's 35%, or it might be 40, of girls identify as conservative.
Not inconsiderable.
So but there's a huge gap there. So a lot of this is actually sexed. And I think a lot of guys are realizing it's much harder to come out as bisexual for a few years, or what was it, be a tug, a lug?
Yes.
Be a lug as a guy. Yeah, be a bug man. And if you're a guy, but it's much easier to do these things as a woman and then kind of change out of it later on. Still not socially acceptable. So guys are realizing that they've got no way into this movement unless they're willing to be, you know, very sort of outwardly flammable gay, and they're going in the exact opposite direction. They're actually reacting. I mean, just the fact that, again, that 12th graders would even have to feel that they need to identify politically, to me, is kind of sad. But this, you know, there's a fundamental disagreements in our society, and it's going to work its way all the way down. I mean, even, I think it was in North Carolina now, they've issued guidances on what age you can appropriately trans your child. And it's like 3 and 4. I mean, you can't escape from this now. And middle schoolers, high schoolers, grade schoolers are going to have to be, you know, kind of inoculated against this indoctrination, or some of them are going to end up being mutilated, which unfortunately, you know, once, like we've talked about on this program, you know, once you've kind of taken that plunge, you don't really, there are a few detransitioners, but a lot of these people just have a sunk cost. And so they need to show up and kind of shout you and Posey Parker down to justify, you know, their own kind of self-inflicted harm. It's like, no, I did this for a reason, and now everybody else needs to understand it as well. You know, I think that's where a lot of the favor is coming from, these people who can't back out anymore.
So I was on like an interview a few days ago where we were talking about Labour's new initiative they're trying to introduce in schools about teaching boys how to respect women.
Oh, yes.
Which is the most hypocritical thing
Yeah.
I've ever heard,
Yes.
because Keir Starmer can't define what a woman is. And I was talking on this interview about the importance of, you know, being able to define a woman, because, you know, our rights are being stripped away. And if, you know, for the importance of trans rights. And as I was making my case, I was immediately cut in several times by the presenter, who was basically just saying, oh, it's just a load of political BS, though, what is a woman? It's like, it felt kind of insulting, because it's like our rights and our spaces are now just used as a political, it's like political manoeuvring rather than actually keeping us safe.
Yes.
And I think this is what we're going to see a lot more of across our society. And I think especially as this ideology sort of goes across even more, especially in schools where you've got these children who are now growing up in this world, I think this is going to get even worse. And even by just saying what a woman is on social media, like for example, I'm quite active about talking about it, and I'll get so much abuse from trans activists, and like even spammed in my private messages, coming at me for my appearance, coming at me like with the most horrific abuse, just because I defined a woman. And for them, it's not about our rights. They don't care about our rights. All they care about is transcribing their ideology everywhere across society.
Are you optimistic that there can be a real sea change among our generation? And I'll ask you finally.
The thing is, I really hope there is, and I think the only way we could see that change is by, you know, all of us, you know, having these conversations and keep actively talking about it to push back against this. Because I think, especially because we're all young, if other young people who might question this see other young people, you know, discussing it on a public forum, they might actually think, oh, maybe I don't have to believe in this. There are other people like me out there. And I think the only way you can push back from this idea, you know, push back this ideology is by challenging it and keep talking about it publicly.
Absolutely. Well, Anna McGovern, thank you very much for joining us on this week's episode. Evan, thanks as ever. You've been watching Deprogrammed. We'll see you next week.
Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.